r/pettyrevenge stepmom called me names so I ruined her golden child fantasy. r/pettyrevenge stepmom called me names so I ruined her golden child fantasy. You're nothing but pathetic trash, and everyone here can see it. The words hit me like a slap across the face, spoken loud enough for my aunts, uncles, and cousins to hear over the Thanksgiving dinner chatter. My stepmother Linda's voice carried that special venom she reserved for when she really wanted to hurt me, but this time she'd miscalculated. This time, she'd said it in front of witnesses. The dining room went dead silent. 20 pairs of eyes stared at us, forks halfway to mouths, as Linda stood there with that fake concerned expression she always wore when she got caught being cruel. My dad was in the kitchen carving the second turkey, completely oblivious to what had just happened. I was just trying to help her improve, Linda said quickly, her voice shifting to that syrupy sweet tone that made my skin crawl. Sometimes tough love is necessary. My Aunt Sarah's eyebrows shot up. Did you just call your stepdaughter trash? Oh no, you misunderstood, Linda started, but I'd heard enough. 5 years of this woman systematically tearing me down, calling me worthless, telling me I was the reason our family couldn't be happy, all while playing perfect stepmother whenever Dad was around. 5 years of watching her precious golden boy Mason get away with everything while she blamed me for his mistakes. But this time felt different. This time, she crossed a line she couldn't uncross. I stood up from the kids' table where she always made me sit, even though I was 17 and Mason got to sit with the adults at 14. Actually, Aunt Sarah, you heard exactly right. Linda calls me names like that all the time when Dad's not around. Linda's face went white, then red. That is absolutely not true. She's always been a difficult child, making up stories for attention. Like how I supposedly broke Mason's gaming laptop last month. I interrupted, my voice getting stronger. The one you made me pay to replace with my job money? Or how about when you told Dad I was the one who put that dent in your car? The room was getting uncomfortable now, family members shifting in their seats. Linda's perfect Thanksgiving was crumbling, and I could see the panic in her eyes as she realized she was losing control of the narrative. Mason is such a good influence on her, Linda said desperately, reaching for her usual script. He's been trying so hard to help her make better choices. Just yesterday he was tutoring her in math because her grades have been slipping. I almost laughed. Mason tutoring anyone was like asking a fish to teach you how to climb trees, but Linda lived in this fantasy world where her son could do no wrong. The same son who'd been systematically bullying kids at school while Linda covered for him. The same son whose report card she'd been hiding from Dad for the past semester. Mason's so helpful, I agreed, my voice dripping with false sweetness. In fact, I have so many stories about what a great influence he's been. Should I share some of them? The look of pure terror that flashed across Linda's face told me everything I needed to know. She knew exactly what kind of stories I could tell, and for the first time in 5 years, she was the one who looked scared. My cousin Jake leaned forward, clearly sensing drama. Yeah, tell us about Mason. Where is the little angel anyway? I smiled, feeling a surge of power I hadn't felt in years. Oh, he's upstairs. Probably busy with one of his hobbies. Linda shot me a warning look that could have frozen hell over, but I was way past caring about her threats. For 5 years, I'd kept my mouth shut about Mason's real behavior to keep the peace. Well, peace was officially over. What kind of hobbies? Aunt Sarah asked, genuinely curious now. She always liked Mason during family visits, mainly because Linda had spent years crafting this image of him as the perfect student-athlete son who could do no wrong. Well, I said, savoring the moment, Mason's really passionate about collecting things. Especially things that don't belong to him. That's enough, Linda hissed under her breath, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Go to your room. Now. Actually, I'm not done eating, I replied sweetly, sitting back down and cutting my turkey with deliberate slowness. And I thought everyone would want to hear about their nephew's achievements. Like how he's been supplementing his allowance. Uncle Mike looked confused. Supplementing how? Linda was gripping her wine glass so hard I thought it might shatter. She's making things up. You know how teenage girls can be when they're jealous of their siblings' success. Success. The word burst out of me with a laugh I couldn't quite control. Is that what we're calling it now? My cousin Emma, who was 15 and always eager for family gossip, leaned in closer. What do you mean, collecting things? This was it. The moment where I could either back down like I always did, or finally tell the truth about Linda's precious golden child. The same kid she bragged about constantly, whose report cards she claimed were straight A's, who she said was being recruited for varsity soccer as a freshman. Mason has a real entrepreneurial spirit, I continued, watching Linda's face go through several shades of panic. He's been running this little business at school where he takes lunch money from younger kids. Very profitable, from what I hear. That's called bullying, Jake said flatly. And stealing. No, Linda jumped in quickly. Mason would never, he's the one being bullied. I've had to go to the school multiple times because other children pick on him for being so academically advanced. Academically advanced? I couldn't help myself now. Linda, should we talk about Mason's actual grades? Because I'm pretty sure Dad would be very interested to hear about those parent-teacher conferences you've been having. The ones you somehow keep forgetting to mention. The color drained completely from Linda's face. Around the table, my relatives were starting to exchange glances, the kind of looks that said they were finally seeing cracks in the perfect family facade Linda had been maintaining for years. You little, Linda started, then caught herself as she realized everyone was watching. You're such a liar. Mason is on the honor roll. The honor roll? I repeated. Really? Because last time I checked, you need passing grades for that. Uncle Mike was frowning now. Wait, what's going on with Mason's grades? Before Linda could answer, we heard footsteps on the stairs. Mason himself appeared in the doorway, earbuds in, completely oblivious to the tension in the room. He had that cocky swagger he always wore around family, safe in the knowledge that his mother would back up any story he wanted to tell. Hey everyone, he said casually, then his eyes met mine and something shifted in his expression. Maybe it was the way everyone was staring, or the fact that his mother looked like she was about to have a heart attack, but Mason suddenly looked a lot less confident. Perfect timing, I said, smiling at him. I was just telling everyone about your hobbies. Mason's eyes darted between me and his mother, and I watched as his brain tried to calculate exactly how much trouble he was in. The cocky smile faltered as he took in the uncomfortable silence around the dinner table. What hobbies? He asked, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. Oh, you know, I said cheerfully, your collecting hobby. And your tutoring business. Linda stood up so fast her chair almost tipped over. Mason, honey, why don't you go back upstairs? The adults are talking. Actually, Uncle Mike interrupted, I'd like to hear about this tutoring business. That's great that you're helping other kids, Mason. Mason looked confused. Tutoring? I don't tutor anyone. The silence that followed was deafening. Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water as she tried to figure out how to spin this. You're being modest, she said weakly. You were just telling me yesterday about helping that boy with his homework. Mom, what are you talking about? I hate homework. I'm failing like half my classes. If I could have bottled the look on Linda's face at that moment, I would have kept it forever. Pure, undiluted horror as her golden child casually destroyed the narrative she'd been building for months. Mason, she hissed. You're confused. Your grades are excellent, remember? We just talked about this. No, they're not, Mason said, genuinely puzzled now. You literally grounded me last week because of my report card. You said if Dad found out about my math grade you'd take away my PlayStation for a month. Aunt Sarah set down her wine glass with a deliberate clink. Linda, what's Mason's math grade? There's been some confusion with the grading system, Linda said frantically. A mix-up with the computer. I got a 38% on my last test, Mason announced helpfully. Mrs. Patterson said it was the worst score she'd seen all semester. Jake let out a low whistle. Dude, that's impressively bad. Mason, stop talking, Linda snapped, dropping all pretense of sweetness. But Mason was on a roll now, completely oblivious to the fact that he was demolishing his mother's carefully constructed lies. And I'm probably getting kicked off the soccer team because Coach found out about the thing with Derek's lunch money. What thing with lunch money? Uncle Mike asked, his voice taking on a sharper edge. I leaned back in my chair, watching the train wreck unfold. This was going even better than I'd hoped. I didn't even need to say anything, Mason was doing all the work for me. It wasn't a big deal, Mason shrugged. Just some kid who was being annoying, so I took his lunch money for like a week. But then his mom called the school and made this huge thing about it. You stole from a younger student. Aunt Sarah's voice was ice cold. I wouldn't call it stealing, Linda jumped in desperately. Boys will be boys, and sometimes there are misunderstandings. Taking someone's lunch money is literally the definition of stealing, Emma said flatly. And bullying. It's not bullying. Linda's voice was getting shrill now. Mason is the victim here. He's constantly picked on because he's so advanced, so mature for his age. Mom, what are you even saying? Mason looked genuinely bewildered. Nobody picks on me. I'm usually the one. That's enough. Linda's shout echoed through the dining room, and for a moment, everyone just stared at her. The mask was completely off now, revealing the woman I knew all too well, angry, controlling, and desperate to maintain her lies at any cost. The problem was, it was too late. The damage was done, and we could all hear Dad's footsteps coming back from the kitchen, whistling and completely unaware that his wife's perfect family fantasy had just imploded at the dinner table. What's all the shouting about? Dad asked cheerfully as he walked into the dining room carrying the second turkey, completely oblivious to the nuclear fallout happening around his dinner table. I could hear voices all the way in the kitchen. Linda immediately plastered on her fake smile, but it was shaky now, desperate. Oh honey, we were just having a lovely conversation about the kids' school activities. Weren't we, sweetie? The way she said, sweetie, while staring daggers at me made it clear exactly what would happen if I didn't play along. For a split second, I hesitated. This was the moment where I usually back down, where I swallowed the truth to keep the peace. Dad looked so happy, so blissfully unaware of the war that had been raging in his own house for 5 years. Part of me wanted to protect that happiness. But then I remembered every cruel word Linda had whispered when he wasn't around. Every time she'd made me feel worthless. Every lie she told to make Mason look perfect while painting me as the problem child. Actually, Dad, we were talking about Mason's grades, I said clearly, watching Linda's face go pale. Did you know he's failing math? Dad set the turkey down and looked confused. Failing? But Linda showed me his report card last month. He had a B+ in math. That was his report card from last year, Mason said helpfully, still completely clueless about the chaos he was creating. This year's been rough. Mom said she'd handle it and not to worry you because you've been stressed about work. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dad's smile faltered as he looked between Linda and Mason, processing what he'd just heard. Linda. Dad's voice was quiet, but I could hear the edge in it. You've been hiding Mason's grades from me. Not hiding, Linda said quickly, her voice getting higher. Just managing the situation. You know how hard you've been working, and I didn't want to add more stress. His grades are my responsibility too, Dad interrupted, and I could see his jaw tightening. We agreed we'd handle all parenting decisions together. We do handle them together, Linda insisted. This was just a small bump in the road. Mason's going to bring his grades up, aren't you, honey? Mason shrugged. I mean, I guess. Math is just really hard, and I've been busy with other stuff. What other stuff? Dad asked, his attention now fully focused on his stepson. I watched Linda's panic intensify. She knew exactly what Mason might say, and none of it would fit her golden child narrative. Just normal teenage activities, Linda said quickly. Soccer, hanging out with friends. Oh, about soccer, Mason interrupted, Coach Martinez wants to talk to you guys. Something about my behavior and whether I can stay on the team. Uncle Mike coughed, clearly trying to hide a laugh. Around the table, my relatives were watching this unfold like it was the most entertaining TV show they'd seen all year. Dad's expression was getting darker by the minute. What about your behavior, Mason? There was this incident with a kid named Derek, Mason said casually. But it wasn't a big deal. I just took his lunch money because he was being weird, and then his parents freaked out and called the school. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad stared at Mason like he'd just grown a second head. You took another student's lunch money? Dad's voice was deadly quiet. It was only like $15 total, Mason protested. And Derek's family has money, so it's not like he was going hungry or anything. That's stealing, Mason. That's what everyone keeps saying, Mason muttered. But it's not like I held him up or anything. I just told him he should share. Linda was frantically trying to do damage control. Honey, you have to understand, Mason was just trying to fit in. The social dynamics at middle school are so complicated. By bullying younger kids. Dad's voice was getting louder now. He's not a bully. Linda snapped, her composure finally cracking completely. Mason is a good kid who made one small mistake. Unlike some people in this family who've been causing problems for years. She shot me a venomous look, and I realized she was about to throw me under the bus to save her son. Again. Speaking of problems, Linda continued, her voice taking on that familiar poisonous tone, maybe we should talk about who's really been the bad influence in this house. I felt the familiar punch to my gut as Linda turned the spotlight back on me, but this time was different. This time, I had an audience that had already seen her true colors. Here we go, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The part where everything becomes my fault. Don't take that tone with me, Linda snapped. Your father needs to know about the kind of behavior you've been modeling for Mason. The lying, the sneaking around, the complete disrespect for authority. What lying? Dad asked, looking genuinely confused. What's sneaking around? Linda's eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction. She thought she was back in control now, redirecting the conversation away from Mason's failures and onto my supposed crimes. The phone calls from school, for starters, Linda said smoothly. The ones I've been handling because I didn't want to worry you. 3 times this semester alone. I felt my stomach drop. There had been phone calls, but not for the reasons she was about to claim. What kind of phone calls? Dad demanded, looking at me now with suspicion I hadn't seen before. Well, Linda continued, drawing out the moment like she was savoring it, there was the incident with the stolen money from the fundraiser. That's not what happened. I burst out, panic rising in my chest. Dad, I found money that had fallen out of the collection box and turned it in. The office called to thank me, not accuse me. That's not how the principal explained it to me, Linda said with fake sadness. She was very concerned about your creative interpretation of events. Uncle Mike was frowning now. Wait, are you saying she stole fundraiser money? I didn't steal anything. I protested, but I could see doubt creeping into some of my relatives' faces. This was Linda's specialty, taking innocent situations and twisting them just enough to make me look guilty. And then there was the fight, Linda continued relentlessly. The one where she attacked another student completely unprovoked. I didn't attack anyone. I was standing now, my voice getting louder. Jenna Morrison was picking on a 6th grader and I told her to stop. She shoved me first. The teacher said you were the aggressor, Linda replied smoothly. Very concerning behavior, especially for someone who's supposed to be setting an example. Dad was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. You got in a fight at school. Why didn't you tell me? Because it wasn't a fight. I felt tears of frustration starting to burn behind my eyes. I was defending someone smaller, and Linda made it sound like I was some kind of violent troublemaker when the school called. The school doesn't call about heroes, Linda said with fake sympathy. They call about problems. Okay, stop. Aunt Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. Linda, I've been listening to this whole conversation, and something doesn't add up. Linda turned to her, clearly not expecting pushback from that corner. I'm sorry. You've been painting Mason as this perfect student while claiming his failures are somehow her fault, Aunt Sarah gestured to me. But from what we've heard tonight, Mason's been bullying kids and failing classes all on his own. Mason made one small mistake, Linda said defensively. But he's been influenced by the toxic atmosphere in this house. What toxic atmosphere? Uncle Mike interrupted. The one where you call a 17-year-old girl pathetic trash in front of the entire family. Linda's mouth opened and closed. She'd clearly forgotten that everyone had heard how this whole conversation started. That was taken out of context, she said weakly. What context makes calling your stepdaughter trash acceptable? Aunt Sarah's voice was ice cold now. Jake leaned forward, grinning like he was watching his favorite reality show. Yeah, Linda, I'm really curious about that context too. I was trying to motivate her to do better, Linda said, her voice getting defensive. Sometimes children need firm guidance. Is that what you call it when you told me I was the reason this family can't be happy? I asked quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Firm guidance. Dad's head snapped around to stare at Linda. You said what? She's exaggerating, Linda said quickly, but her voice was getting shrill again. You know how dramatic teenagers can be. So you did say it, Dad's voice was dangerously quiet. I was having a bad day, and she was being particularly difficult. There's no excuse for calling a child names, Aunt Sarah interrupted firmly. Ever. She's not my child. Linda snapped, and the moment the words left her mouth, I could see she regretted them. I mean, of course I care about her, but the dynamic is complicated when you're dealing with a stepchild who resents your presence. I never resented you, I said quietly. I was 12 years old. I just wanted you to like me. The room went silent again, and I could see something shift in Dad's expression as he really looked at me for the first time all evening. Linda, he said slowly, we need to talk. Privately. But Linda wasn't done fighting yet. Fine, she said, her voice turning vicious. But before we do, maybe Mason should tell everyone about what he found in her room last week. Mason looked confused. What are you talking about, Mom? The cigarettes, Linda said triumphantly. The ones you found hidden in her dresser drawer. I stared at her in complete shock. What cigarettes? I've never smoked in my life. But Mason was shaking his head, looking bewildered. Mom, those were mine. Remember? You said not to tell Dad because it would disappoint him. The look of absolute horror on Linda's face was almost worth 5 years of abuse. The silence that followed Mason's confession was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Linda's face had gone from white to gray, like all the blood had just drained from her body. The cigarettes were yours. Dad's voice was barely above a whisper, but somehow it carried more weight than if he'd been shouting. Mason nodded, still looking confused about why this was such a big deal. Yeah, Tommy Chen gave them to me last month. Mom caught me with them and said she'd handle it without getting you involved. She told me to hide them somewhere until she figured out how to. I said get rid of them, Linda interrupted frantically. I told you to throw them away. No, you said hide them until after Thanksgiving because you didn't want to ruin the holiday, Mason corrected her. So I stuck them in her dresser because I figured no one would look there. Uncle Mike let out a low whistle. So you were planning to frame your stepdaughter for your son's cigarettes? I wasn't framing anyone, Linda stammered. I just thought if they were discovered, it would be better if I got blamed instead of your precious golden boy. The words came out harder than I intended, but I was beyond caring about keeping my voice down. Dad was staring at Linda like he'd never seen her before. You were going to let me punish her for something Mason did? It wasn't like that, Linda said desperately. I was protecting Mason from making a bigger mistake. By letting me make one instead. I could feel 5 years of suppressed anger finally bubbling over. How is that protecting anyone except your perfect reputation? Don't you dare take that tone with me, Linda snapped, her mask slipping completely now. You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this family. Sacrificed? Aunt Sarah's voice could have cut glass. What exactly have you sacrificed, Linda? My time, my energy, trying to help a troubled teenager who fights me at every turn, Linda shot back, gesturing at me like I was some kind of evidence. Do you have any idea how difficult it is to blend a family when one child refuses to accept the new dynamic? I was 12. I shouted, not caring anymore who heard me. I was a little kid who just wanted her dad to be happy, and you made me feel like garbage for existing. That's enough, Dad said firmly, but he was looking at Linda, not me. Linda, we need to talk. Now. Privately. But Linda wasn't backing down. If anything, she seemed to be doubling down on her attack, like she decided that the best defense was a nuclear offense. Fine, she said, her voice turning cold and calculating. But since we're sharing family secrets tonight, maybe everyone should know about the real reason she's been acting out lately. My blood turned to ice. There was something in her tone that made every alarm bell in my head start ringing. What are you talking about? Dad asked. Linda's smile was pure poison. Ask her about the college applications. Ask her why she's been so secretive about her plans for next year. My heart started pounding. I had been secretive about college applications, but not for the reasons she was about to imply. I'd been working with my guidance counselor to apply for scholarships and programs that would let me escape this house, but I hadn't told Dad yet because I was afraid Linda would sabotage them somehow. What about college applications? Dad looked confused. She's been planning to abandon this family the moment she turns 18, Linda continued, her voice dripping with fake hurt. All those late nights studying. She's been researching schools as far away as possible. She can't wait to run away and leave us all behind. That's not, I started, but Linda cut me off. She's already been accepted to 3 schools and hasn't told you about any of them, Linda announced triumphantly. Including one in California. Because apparently, destroying our family dynamic wasn't enough, she wants to make sure she can physically escape any responsibility too. Dad turned to look at me, and the hurt in his eyes made my chest tight. Is that true? You got accepted to colleges and didn't tell me? I could feel my relatives watching this family drama unfold, but all I could focus on was the disappointment in my father's voice and the victorious gleam in Linda's eyes. She thought she'd won. Yes, I said quietly, my voice barely audible over the sound of my heart pounding. I got accepted to some schools. The disappointment in Dad's eyes deepened, and I watched Linda's triumphant smile spread wider. She thought she had me cornered, thought she'd finally found the perfect weapon to turn Dad against me completely. And you didn't think to tell me? Dad's voice was soft, heard in a way that made my chest ache. I was going to, I said desperately. I wanted to figure out the financial aid stuff first before getting your hopes up. Her hopes up. Linda laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. She's been planning her escape route for months. This whole victim act tonight. It's just her way of justifying abandoning her family when things get tough. That's not true, I protested, but I could see doubt creeping into some of my relatives' faces again. Linda was good at this, taking a grain of truth and twisting it until it became a weapon. Really? Linda's voice was getting stronger now, more confident. She sensed blood in the water. Then tell everyone which schools you applied to. Tell them how far away you're planning to run. I applied to state schools too, I said weakly, but even I could hear how defensive I sounded. But your top choice is UC San Diego, isn't it? Linda pressed. 3,000 miles away. As far from this family as you can possibly get. Uncle Mike frowned. That's a good school. Why wouldn't she apply there? Because she's not trying to get a good education, Linda shot back. She's trying to punish us. This whole performance tonight, all these accusations and lies, it's her way of salting the earth before she disappears forever. They're not lies, I said, but my voice cracked on the words. Everything I said about Mason is true, and you know it. Is it? Linda turned to Mason with that same poisonous smile. Mason, honey, tell everyone the truth. Have you ever seen me be cruel to your stepsister? I watched in horror as Mason shifted uncomfortably. He knew exactly what his mother was doing, putting him in a position where he had to choose between protecting me or protecting himself. Mason glanced between his mother and me, clearly calculating which answer would cause him the least trouble. You guys argue sometimes, but like, all families argue, right? That's not what I asked, Linda pressed gently, but there was steel underneath her tone. Have you ever seen me call her names or be mean to her? Mason's eyes darted to mine, and I could see the apology there before he even spoke. Not really. You get frustrated sometimes, but you get frustrated with me too when I mess up. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Mason had been there for some of Linda's worst moments. He'd heard her call me worthless, had watched her systematically tear down my self-esteem for years. But of course he was going to protect his mother over me. See? Linda's voice was gentle now, sad and disappointed. Mason lives in this house too. If I was really this monster she's describing, don't you think he would have noticed? You don't do it when he's around, I said desperately, looking around the table at my relatives. She's careful. She only does it when it's just us, or when Dad's not home. That's a very convenient claim, Linda replied smoothly. Impossible to prove, but very dramatic. Aunt Sarah was frowning now, clearly torn between what she'd witnessed earlier and Linda's systematic dismantling of my credibility. But we all heard you call her trash at the beginning of dinner. After an hour of listening to her attack my son, Linda said, her voice taking on a martyr tone. Yes, I lost my temper. I'm not perfect. But one moment of frustration after months of dealing with a teenager who's been planning to abandon this family. I think anyone would reach their breaking point. I haven't been planning to abandon anyone, I insisted, but I could hear how weak it sounded. Then explain the secrecy, Dad said quietly. Explain why you didn't tell me about the college acceptances. I looked at him, this man who had raised me, who I loved more than anything, and realized that Linda had maneuvered me into a corner where the truth sounded like an excuse. How could I explain that I'd kept the college applications secret because I was afraid his wife would sabotage them? How could I tell him that I'd been planning to escape because living in his house had become unbearable? How could I make him understand that every day felt like a war zone where I was constantly under attack? I started, then stopped, watching Linda's satisfied smile grow wider. She knew she had won this round. And the worst part was, she'd done it by using my own father's love against me. The silence stretched on as I struggled to find words that wouldn't sound like excuses. Linda watched me with that patient, concerned expression she wore so well, the one that said she was just a loving stepmother trying to understand a troubled teenager. The truth is, I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt, I applied to those schools because I needed options. Because living in this house. I looked directly at Linda, has been suffocating. Suffocating, Linda repeated sadly, like the word itself proved how unreasonable I was being. Your father works 2 jobs to give you every opportunity, we've included you in family vacations, family dinners, family traditions. Where you make me sit at the kids' table even though I'm older than Mason, I interrupted. The seating arrangements are practical, Linda said smoothly. The kids' table is more relaxed, less pressure. It's humiliating, and you know it. I could feel my composure cracking again. Just like making me do Mason's chores when he forgets, or telling Dad I ate the last of something when Mason actually did, or... These are such small, petty complaints, Linda sighed, looking around the table with an expression of long-suffering patience. This is exactly what I mean about her attitude. Everything is a persecution complex with her. Because you are persecuting me. The words exploded out of me louder than I intended. You've spent 5 years making me feel like I don't belong in my own home. Dad flinched at my volume, and I watched Linda file that reaction away for later use. Lower your voice, Dad said quietly. This is your aunt and uncle's house. The fact that he was correcting my tone instead of addressing what I'd said felt like another small defeat. Linda's expression shifted to one of gentle vindication. See how disrespectful she is. I'm sorry for raising my voice, I said, forcing myself to sound calmer. But Dad, you have to listen to what I'm telling you. She treats me differently when you're not around. That's a very serious accusation, Uncle Mike said slowly. If it's true. It's not, Linda said firmly. And frankly, I'm hurt that after 5 years of trying to build a relationship with her, this is how she chooses to repay that effort. By making up stories to justify running away to college across the country. They're not stories, I insisted, but I could see I was losing ground. Linda had successfully reframed the entire conversation around my college plans and my supposed betrayal of the family. Then prove it, Linda said gently. If I'm really this terrible person you're describing, there should be evidence. Text messages, emails, something that shows this pattern of abuse you're claiming. My heart sank. Of course there were no text messages. Linda was too smart for that. Her cruelty was always verbal, always private, always deniable. She doesn't put it in writing, I said weakly. How convenient, Linda replied with that same sad smile. Just like how Mason supposedly never sees any of this behavior, and your father never witnesses it, and there's no proof of any of it happening. Jake was looking uncomfortable now. I mean, we did hear you call her trash earlier. After listening to her attack my son for an hour, Linda repeated patiently. Context matters. One moment of lost temper doesn't prove a pattern of abuse. What about Mason's grades? I asked desperately. What about the lies you've been telling Dad? I was managing a difficult situation with my son's education, Linda replied smoothly. Parents sometimes make judgment calls about timing and communication. That's very different from the systematic emotional abuse you're accusing me of. I felt the walls closing in around me. Every point I made, Linda had a reasonable-sounding counter for. Every example I gave, she recontextualized until I sounded like a hysterical teenager making mountains out of molehills. This is exactly why I need to get out of here, I said quietly, the defeat clear in my voice. And Linda smiled, because I just handed her the perfect closing argument. There it is, she said softly, like she was sad to be proven right. She just admitted it. This whole performance tonight, it's all about justifying her decision to abandon this family. The word abandon hit me like a physical blow, and I watched as it landed exactly the way Linda intended. Dad's face crumpled with hurt, and around the table, my relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I'm not abandoning anyone, I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to me. Going to college isn't abandoning. 3,000 miles away, Linda interrupted gently. Without discussing it with your family first. Making secret plans and hiding acceptance letters. She turned to Dad with that perfectly crafted expression of wounded motherhood. Honey, I know this is hard to hear, but I think we need to consider that maybe she's been looking for reasons to justify leaving. Maybe that's what tonight was really about. I stared at her in amazement. In the span of 20 minutes, she had taken my moment of truth-telling and twisted it into evidence of my own selfishness. She had turned my desperation to escape her toxicity into proof that I was the toxic one. That's not what happened, I protested, but I could hear how desperate I sounded. I told the truth about Mason because I was tired of watching you lie. Mason made mistakes, Linda acknowledged with a small nod. Teenage boys do that. But a loving family member would have come to us privately, tried to help him improve. Instead, you chose to humiliate him in front of the entire extended family. She paused, letting that sink in. That doesn't sound like someone who wants to fix problems. That sounds like someone who wants to create them. Mason was nodding along now, probably relieved that the focus had shifted away from his failures and onto my supposed betrayal. Yeah, you could have just talked to me instead of embarrassing me in front of everyone. When? I snapped, my frustration boiling over. When could I have talked to you? You avoid me unless your mom makes you interact with me for show. That's not true, Mason said defensively. You're the one who's always in your room with the door closed. Because every time I come out, your mother finds something to criticize me about. See? Linda spread her hands like she was presenting evidence to a jury. Even now, she can't take responsibility for her own choices. Everything is someone else's fault. Aunt Sarah was frowning, clearly trying to process everything she'd witnessed. Linda, I have to say, some of the things we heard tonight were concerning. Of course they were concerning, Linda agreed readily. It's concerning when a 17-year-old builds up 5 years of resentment and then explodes at a family dinner. It's concerning when a child makes secret plans to move across the country without including her parents. It's concerning when someone would rather destroy family relationships than work on improving them. But what about the name-calling? Uncle Mike asked. We all heard you call her trash. Linda's face fell into an expression of genuine remorse. You're absolutely right. That was wrong of me, and I apologize. I let my frustration get the better of me after months of watching this family dynamic deteriorate. She turned to me with what looked like sincere regret. I'm sorry I called you that. It was hurtful and inappropriate, and I was wrong. The apology was perfectly timed and perfectly delivered, and I watched as it did exactly what Linda intended. My relatives relaxed slightly, nodding as if this proved she was reasonable after all. However, Linda continued, and I knew the real blow was coming. I think we also need to address why I was so frustrated. Living with someone who resents your presence, who fights every attempt at building a relationship, who makes secret plans to leave the family, it takes a toll. It doesn't excuse my words, but I hope it explains them. Dad was looking at me now with an expression I'd never seen before, disappointment mixed with confusion, like he was seeing me through Linda's eyes for the first time. Is that how you really feel? He asked quietly. Like you need to escape from us? The question broke something inside me, because the honest answer was yes, but not for the reasons Linda was making it seem. I looked at my father, really looked at him, and saw 5 years of Linda's careful manipulation written in his confused expression. She had positioned herself as the reasonable one, the victim of my supposed resentment, and now even he was questioning whether I was the problem. Dad, I said quietly, do you remember my 13th birthday? He blinked, clearly not expecting the question. Your 13th? Of course. We had that nice dinner at Romano's. Do you remember what I asked for? You wanted that art set, the expensive one with all the different pencils and paints. I nodded slowly. And do you remember what happened to it? Linda's face went very still, but I kept my eyes on Dad. You used it all up pretty quickly, didn't you? Dad said, looking confused about where this was going. Kids go through art supplies fast. I used it exactly once, I corrected softly. The day after my birthday, I left my drawings on the kitchen table to show you when you got home from work. When I came back, they were in the trash, and Mason was using my paints to make handprints on poster board for a school project. That's not, Linda started, but I held up my hand. Linda told me you said it was fine, that sharing art supplies would be good for me. She said you thought I was being selfish for wanting to keep them to myself. I finally looked at my father's face. Did you really say that, Dad? The confusion in his eyes was deepening. No, I never said anything about art supplies. I didn't even know. She told me you were disappointed that I wasn't being a good big sister, I continued, my voice getting stronger. She said you thought I needed to learn to put Mason's needs first because he was younger and adjusting to the new family dynamic. I never said that. Dad's voice was barely audible. I would never say that. Around the table, the atmosphere was shifting again. My relatives were watching this exchange with growing unease. But I believed her, I said, looking directly at Linda now. Just like I believed her when she told me you said I was too old for birthday parties when I turned 15. Just like I believed her when she said you thought I was being dramatic about wanting my own room back after Mason decided he liked mine better. Linda's composure was starting to crack. Those are misunderstandings. Communication issues that. Are they? I interrupted. Because I'm starting to think there's a pattern here. You tell me Dad said things he never said. You tell Dad I did things I never did. You're like a filter between us, and somehow everything that goes through you makes us both look bad to each other. That's a very paranoid way of thinking, Linda said, but her voice was getting defensive again. You're seeing conspiracies where there are simple miscommunications. Like how you told Dad I didn't want to go on a family vacation to the beach last summer. I asked. When I actually begged you to ask him if I could come. Dad was staring at Linda now, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. You said she was going through a phase where she wanted to stay home. You said she'd be miserable if we forced her to come. I never said that, I replied firmly. I spent that whole week alone while you guys had family bonding time, thinking you didn't want me there. This is ridiculous, Linda snapped, her patience finally fraying. A few miscommunications over the years don't prove some elaborate conspiracy. What about Christmas morning? I asked, pressing my advantage. 2 years ago, when Dad asked where the necklace was that he bought me, and you said I'd already put it away because I didn't like it. Linda's face went white. I don't remember. I never saw that necklace, I said clearly. Not until I found it in your jewelry box last month when you asked me to get your earrings for you. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Mason was staring at his mother now, clearly putting together pieces of a puzzle he'd never noticed before. That's impossible, Linda said weakly. You must be confused. Am I confused about the college letters too? I asked. The ones you offered to check the mail for every day. The rejection letters you said came from State and Central. Because I called them last week, and they said my applications were never completed. The transcripts were never sent. Uncle Mike leaned forward. Someone sabotaged your college applications. I nodded, feeling pieces of a 5-year puzzle finally clicking into place. Just the local ones. The ones that would have let me stay close to home. Dad's face had gone completely pale. Linda, tell me you didn't interfere with her college applications. The silence stretched on as Linda seemed to be calculating her next move. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, harder, more desperate. I was protecting this family, she said, dropping all pretense of the gentle stepmother act. Do you have any idea what it would do to Mason if she got into state and stayed local? The constant comparisons. Him watching his older stepsister succeed while he struggles. So you sabotaged my future to protect his feelings. I couldn't believe she was actually admitting it. I was evening the playing field, Linda shot back. You've always been the smart one, the responsible one. Do you know how that makes Mason feel? How it makes me look as a mother? Jake let out a low whistle. Holy crap, she actually did it. Language, Aunt Sarah murmured automatically, but her eyes were locked on Linda with a mixture of shock and disgust. Dad stood up so abruptly his chair scraped against the floor. You've been manipulating both of us for 5 years. I've been trying to build a cohesive family unit, Linda insisted, but her voice was getting shrill again. Everything I did was to create balance, to make sure everyone had equal opportunities. By lying to me about my own daughter. Dad's voice was getting louder now. By stealing her mail. By making her think I didn't want her around. You don't understand the dynamics at play here, Linda said frantically. She was always going to be the favorite because she's yours. Mason needed extra support to compete with that. Compete? Dad looked incredulous. They're not in competition. They're supposed to be family. Easy to say when your child is the one with all the advantages, Linda snapped, and suddenly I could see the real resentment she'd been hiding for years. Perfect grades, perfect behavior, your biological daughter who could do no wrong. Do you have any idea what it's like watching your own son come in second place every single day? Mason was staring at his mother like he'd never seen her before. Mom, what are you talking about? Dad never made me feel like I was in second place. Because I made sure of that, Linda replied fiercely. I made sure you got equal attention, equal opportunities, equal consideration. I leveled the playing field. By tearing me down, I said quietly. By making me feel worthless so he could feel better about himself. I never said you were worthless, Linda protested, but her heart wasn't in it anymore. You called me a mistake, I reminded her. You said this family would be happy if I wasn't in it. You said I was the reason Dad was stressed all the time. Uncle Mike was shaking his head slowly. Linda, this is emotional abuse. This is systematic psychological manipulation. Don't be so dramatic, Linda said, but she was looking around the table and clearly realizing that she'd lost everyone. Blended families are complicated. Sometimes tough choices have to be made. Tough choices. Dad's voice was deadly quiet now. You made my daughter think I didn't love her. You made me think she was pulling away from me. You've been poisoning our relationship for years. I was trying to protect Mason. By destroying her. Dad gestured to me, and I could see tears in his eyes now. By making her feel like she had to escape her own home. She was always going to leave anyway, Linda said desperately. Smart kids like her, they go away to college and never come back. At least this way Mason wouldn't have to watch her abandon him too. I wasn't planning to abandon anyone, I said, my voice cracking. I just wanted to get away from you. The honest admission hung in the air like a bomb. Linda stared at me, and for the first time in 5 years, I saw something that might have been genuine hurt in her eyes. There it is, she whispered. The truth finally. You hate me. I hate how you made me feel, I corrected. I hate that you took my dad away from me piece by piece. I hate that you made me think I was the problem. Dad was looking between us, and I could see him processing 5 years of carefully constructed lies finally falling apart. Pack a bag, he said quietly to Linda. You're staying somewhere else tonight. Linda's face crumpled. Honey, please. Pack. A bag. You can't kick me out, Linda said, her voice rising to a near shriek. This is my house too. I have rights. It's Thanksgiving, Dad said quietly, but there was steel in his voice I'd rarely heard before. Your son is here. Our family is here. You need to leave before this gets worse. Before it gets worse. Linda laughed, but it sounded hysterical. You're going to throw away 5 years of marriage because of her lies. They're not lies, Mason said suddenly, his voice small but clear. Everyone turned to stare at him as his face crumpled with what looked like shame. Mom, you did say those things to her. I heard you. Linda's face went white. Mason. You told her she was stupid when she couldn't figure out the new coffee machine, he continued, his words tumbling out faster now. You said Dad would be embarrassed if he knew how useless she was. You said it was pathetic how she tried so hard to impress him. I was having a bad day, Linda said desperately. Everyone says things they don't mean. You said it a lot, Mason interrupted, looking at me with guilt written all over his face. I thought it was normal. I thought that's just how stepmoms talked when dads weren't around. Dad's hands were clenched into fists at his sides. What else did you hear, Mason? She told her that her real mom probably left because she was too much work, Mason said quietly, not meeting anyone's eyes. She said that's why she died in a car accident, because she was trying to get away from. That's enough. Linda's voice cracked like a whip. You don't understand the context of those conversations. But Dad was staring at her like she was a stranger. You said that about Sarah? About her mother? The room felt like it had dropped 20 degrees. My mom's death had always been the one topic that was completely off limits, the one wound that Dad and I both protected fiercely. I was trying to make her understand that running away doesn't solve problems, Linda said frantically. It was a lesson about family loyalty. Get out. Dad's voice was so quiet it was almost a whisper, but something in his tone made Linda take a step back. Get out of this house right now. And go where? Linda demanded, desperation making her voice shrill. It's Thanksgiving night. My family is 3 states away. Call them, Uncle Mike said grimly. I'm sure they'll understand once you explain why you got kicked out. You don't understand, Linda said, turning to address the whole table now. She's been planning this. This whole dinner, this whole performance, it was designed to turn you against me. Actually, Aunt Sarah said slowly, I don't think she planned anything. I think you just finally showed us who you really are. This is insane, Linda said, her voice getting higher. 5 years of marriage, and you're going to throw it all away because of one bad dinner. 5 years of lies, Dad corrected. 5 years of making my daughter feel unwanted in her own home. 5 years of sabotaging her relationship with me. I was building a family. Linda screamed, completely losing control now. Do you have any idea how impossible it is to compete with a dead woman? She talks about her mother like she was some kind of saint, and I'm supposed to just live in that shadow forever. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Even Mason was staring at his mother with horror. Mom, he whispered, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? Linda turned on him with wild eyes. What's wrong with me is that I've spent 5 years trying to give you a father and a stable home, and this is how you repay me. By taking her side. I'm not taking anyone's side, Mason said, backing away from her. I'm just telling the truth. The truth? Linda laughed bitterly. The truth is that none of you appreciate what I've sacrificed for this family. The truth is that I'm the one holding everything together while you all live in your fantasy worlds. Dad was already moving toward the stairs. I'll pack your bag myself if I have to. Don't you dare touch my things, Linda snarled, following him. If I'm leaving, I'm taking Mason with me. No. The word came out of me with more force than I'd ever used before. You're not dragging him into this anymore. Linda spun around to face me, and for the first time in 5 years, I saw real fear in her eyes. You don't get to decide. Actually, Mason said quietly, I want to stay here. The look on Linda's face was pure devastation. Mason, you're my son. And you just told me you've been lying to Dad for years, he shot back. You made me lie too. You made me hide my grades and my cigarettes and pretend like everything was fine when it wasn't. I was protecting you. No, you were protecting yourself, Mason said, sounding older than his 14 years. And you were hurting her to do it. Linda looked around the room at all of us, her son rejecting her, her husband packing her bags, her extended family staring at her with disgust and horror. The perfect Thanksgiving she'd planned had become the complete destruction of every relationship she'd worked to build. Fine, she said finally, her voice cold and bitter. But don't come crying to me when this family falls apart without me to hold it together. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, then stopped and turned back to look at me one last time. You think you've won something here, she said, her voice dripping with venom. But all you've done is destroy your father's marriage and traumatize a 14-year-old boy. I hope you're proud of yourself. The front door slammed behind her, leaving us all sitting in the wreckage of what was supposed to be a family holiday. Dad came back downstairs carrying a hastily packed suitcase, which he set by the door with shaking hands. I'm sorry, he said quietly, not looking at anyone. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. But I barely heard him, because I was staring at Mason, who looked like his whole world had just collapsed. And I realized that Linda might have been right about one thing, I might have just destroyed more than I'd intended to save. The silence after Linda's departure felt heavier than anything that had come before. Dad stood by the door staring at her suitcase like it might explode, while Mason sat slumped in his chair looking like someone had just told him Santa Claus was a lie. Well, Jake said finally, that was the most intense Thanksgiving dinner I've ever witnessed. Jacob, Aunt Sarah hissed, shooting him a warning look. But the comment seemed to snap Dad out of his trance. He turned around, his face gray and exhausted, and for the first time I realized how much older he looked than he had this morning. I need to call her parents, he said quietly. Let them know what happened before she does. Dad, wait, I started, but he was already heading for his phone. We should probably head home too, Uncle Mike said awkwardly, clearly desperate to escape the family drama they'd just witnessed. Let you guys figure this out. No, please don't, I said quickly, panic rising in my chest. We're supposed to have pie, and watch football, and... I trailed off, realizing how desperate I sounded. The truth was, I was terrified of what would happen when it was just the 3 of us left to deal with the aftermath of what I'd unleashed. Sweetheart, Aunt Sarah said gently, I think your family needs some time to process everything that just happened. But this was supposed to be a good day, I said, my voice cracking. This was supposed to be about being thankful and spending time together. Mason let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, well, I guess we learned what our family's really like, didn't we? His words hit me like a slap. The guilt I'd been pushing down all evening suddenly crashed over me in a wave that made it hard to breathe. Mason, I'm sorry, I said quickly. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. Didn't you? He asked, and there was something cold in his voice I'd never heard before. You planned this whole thing, didn't you? Got everyone here so there'd be witnesses when you destroyed my mom. That's not, I just wanted people to know the truth. The truth? Mason stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. The truth is that my mom tried really hard to make this family work, and you just couldn't handle not being the center of attention anymore. Mason, that's not fair, Dad said, finally looking up from his phone. Isn't it? Mason's voice was getting louder now. She's been planning to leave anyway. She said so herself. So why not burn everything down on her way out? I'm not burning anything down, I protested. Your mom was hurting me, and I just wanted. You wanted to hurt her back, Mason interrupted. And you didn't care who else got caught in the crossfire. Uncle Mike was gathering up his coat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this conversation was heading. Maybe we should let you 3 talk this through privately. Yeah, Mason said bitterly, because privacy's worked out so well for this family so far. I watched my relatives file out, each of them giving me awkward hugs and murmuring things like, take care of yourself, and call if you need anything. But I could see the doubt in their eyes now too, the wondering if maybe I really had orchestrated this whole disaster. When the door closed behind them, the house felt enormous and empty despite the three of us still being there. Dad sat down heavily at the dining table, surrounded by the remnants of our ruined Thanksgiving dinner. Her parents aren't answering, he said quietly. I'll have to try again later. Maybe she's already called them, I suggested. Maybe she's already told them her version of what happened. Her version. Mason whirled around to face me. You mean the version where you ambushed her at dinner and turned the whole family against her? Mason, stop, Dad said tiredly. This isn't her fault. Isn't it? Mason's voice cracked slightly. She's the one who started this whole thing. She's the one who made Mom look bad in front of everyone. Your mother made herself look bad, Dad replied, but his voice lacked conviction. The doubt in his tone sent a chill through me. After everything we'd just uncovered, after all of Linda's lies had been exposed, was he already starting to question whether I'd done the right thing? What if Mason's right? I asked quietly. What if I did plan this? What if I wanted to hurt her? Dad looked at me with tired eyes. Did you? The question hung in the air between us, and I realized I didn't know how to answer it. Had some part of me wanted to watch Linda's perfect facade crumble? Had I been planning this moment of revenge longer than I wanted to admit? I don't know, I whispered, and the honesty of it terrified me. The admission hung in the air like smoke, poisoning whatever understanding Dad and I had started to rebuild. I watched his face change, watched the doubt creep back in as he processed what I just said. You don't know. Dad's voice was barely above a whisper. You just destroyed my marriage, and you don't know if you meant to. I meant to tell the truth, I said desperately. But maybe part of me wanted her to hurt too. Mason let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. At least you're finally being honest. I'm trying to be honest, I shot back, frustration mixing with guilt. I'm trying to figure out what's real and what isn't after 5 years of being told I was crazy. You're not crazy, Dad said quietly, rubbing his temples. But that doesn't mean this was the right way to handle it. What was the right way? I demanded. I tried talking to you before. Every time I brought up problems with Linda, you said I needed to try harder, be more understanding. You took her word over mine every single time. Because I didn't know she was lying to me too, Dad exploded, his composure finally cracking completely. Do you think this is easy for me? Finding out my wife has been manipulating my relationship with my daughter for 5 years. Finding out I failed to protect you from someone living in my own house. His pain hit me like a physical blow. In all my anger at Linda, I hadn't fully considered what this revelation was doing to him. Dad, I'm sorry. Are you? He looked at me with eyes full of hurt and confusion. Because right now it feels like you've been planning this nuclear option for months, and you finally found the perfect moment to deploy it. That's not true, I protested, but even as I said it, I could feel the lie in it. Hadn't I been collecting evidence? Hadn't I been waiting for the right moment when Linda would finally go too far in front of witnesses? You recorded her, Mason said suddenly, his voice hollow. Last month, when she was yelling at you about the broken vase. I saw you with your phone. My blood turned to ice. I never. You were going to use it against her, Mason continued, the pieces clicking together in his head. You've been building a case. Dad stared at me with something that looked like horror. Is that true? Do you have recordings of Linda? I only recorded her once, I admitted, my voice barely audible. And I never used it. I deleted it the same day. But you thought about using it, Dad said, and it wasn't a question. The silence that followed felt like a judgment. Even I couldn't deny anymore that some part of me had been preparing for war, stockpiling ammunition for the day Linda finally pushed me too far. She drove me to it, I said weakly. 5 years of psychological warfare, and you're surprised I started thinking about fighting back. Fighting back by destroying our family? Mason's voice was getting higher, more desperate. Do you understand what you've done? My mom is gone. My parents' marriage is over. And for what? So you could feel vindicated. Your mom was destroying this family long before tonight, I snapped, my guilt making me defensive. She was just doing it slowly, quietly, where no one could see. So you decided to do it quickly and loudly instead. The accusation hit home because part of it was true. I had chosen the nuclear option. I had decided that if Linda was going to make my life miserable, I was going to make sure everyone knew about it. Maybe I should have handled it differently, I said quietly. But I'm 17 years old, and I've been drowning for 5 years. Tonight was the first time I felt like I could breathe. Dad's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with a grimace. Linda's sister. She wants to know what happened. What are you going to tell her? I asked. I don't know, Dad admitted, staring at the phone like it was a bomb. How do I explain that my wife has been emotionally abusing my daughter without making it sound like I'm the worst father in the world for not noticing? Because you're not, I said quickly. Dad, she was manipulating you too. She made sure you never saw. Stop making excuses for me, Dad interrupted, his voice sharp. I should have seen it. I should have protected you. The fact that I didn't makes me complicit in whatever damage she did. Mason was staring between us with an expression I couldn't read. So what happens now? You guys just pretend like the last 5 years never happened. Like my mom was some kind of evil stepmother in a fairy tale. I don't know what happens now, Dad said honestly. I need to talk to a lawyer. I need to figure out where Linda's going to stay long term. I need to figure out how to fix everything that's broken. What if it can't be fixed? I asked quietly. What if I've broken things that can't be put back together? Dad looked at me for a long moment, and I could see him wrestling with the same question. Then we'll have to learn to live with the consequences, he said finally. All of us. The weight of those words settled over the three of us like a shroud, and I realized that winning the war against Linda might have cost me more than I'd ever imagined losing. The three of us sat in the wreckage of our Thanksgiving dinner, surrounded by cold turkey and the echoes of Linda's final accusations. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. I should probably go pack, I said finally, standing up from the table. Figure out my dorm situation for spring semester. Sit down, Dad said quietly, but with enough authority that I found myself lowering back into my chair. We're not done talking. What's left to say? Mason asked bitterly. She got what she wanted. Mom's gone, the family's destroyed, and now she gets to ride off into the sunset to her fancy California college. Is that really what you think? Dad asked, looking between us. That she orchestrated this whole thing just to justify leaving? Mason shrugged, but I could see tears starting in his eyes. Doesn't matter what I think anymore, does it? I looked at this 14-year-old boy who just watched his mother reveal herself as someone completely different than who he thought she was, and felt something shift in my chest. Mason, I said quietly, I didn't want to hurt you. I know it doesn't seem that way, but destroying your relationship with your mom was never the goal. Then what was the goal? He asked, finally meeting my eyes. Surviving, I said simply. For 5 years, I felt like I was disappearing piece by piece. Tonight was the first time I felt real again. Dad was watching this exchange with something that looked like hope. What if we tried again? All three of us, without Linda poisoning every interaction. You think it's that simple? Mason asked. Just pretend like the last 5 years never happened. No, I said before Dad could answer. We don't pretend it never happened. We acknowledge that it was messed up, and we try to figure out what we actually want our family to look like. Mason was quiet for a long moment. What if I'm too much like her? What if I learned all the wrong things about how to treat people? The vulnerability in his voice broke something open in me. Then we'll both have to unlearn some things. But Mason, you chose to tell the truth tonight even when it hurt your mom. That tells me you're not like her. Dad reached across the table and put his hand over mine. I owe you both an apology. I brought Linda into our lives, and I failed to protect either of you from the damage she caused. You couldn't have known, I started, but he shook his head. I should have listened better. I should have looked harder. I should have trusted my own daughter when she tried to tell me something was wrong. We all made mistakes, Mason said quietly. I knew Mom was saying mean things to you, and I never spoke up until tonight. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not Linda's golden child or my rival for Dad's attention, but a scared kid who'd been caught in the middle of an impossible situation. Want to try something? I asked impulsively. Want to try actually being brother and sister instead of whatever weird competition your mom set up between us? Mason's smile was tentative but real. Yeah, I'd like that. Dad's phone buzzed again, but this time he ignored it. Linda's family can wait. Right now, I want to sit here with my kids and figure out how to move forward. Together? I asked, hardly daring to hope. Together, Dad confirmed. And when you do go to college, wherever that ends up being, it'll be because we're all excited for your future, not because you're running away from us. Outside, the sun was setting on what had started as Linda's perfect Thanksgiving. But sitting there with Dad and Mason, planning a future built on truth instead of lies, it felt like the first real family dinner we'd had in 5 years. It wasn't the ending I planned for, but it was the beginning I'd been hoping for all along.